Okay, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to the seminar today. I would like to give a very short introduction of the reason of this seminar. As you probably know, and you have seen in the screen in the entrance of the Institute, during these 3 days, we had the first meeting of the Consolidated Project, EPI, exploring the physics of inflation, and together with the fourth Quixote Consortium meeting that just ended a few minutes ago. And within this context, as you know, this project is concerned about understanding the physics on inflation and among other things, building another instrument for the Quixote project. So within this context, we thought that it would be good to have a general review on the topic of inflation and how it's related with CMB physics. So because of this reason, we invited Mar Bastero of the University of Granada to give this review. So let me say a few words about Mar. She did the PhD in Madrid, and after that she had several postdocs in Italy, I think, and UK. And since 8 years ago, she's a professor at the University of Granada, the Department of Theoretical Physics. And she works in this topic, in cosmological inflation. She will be giving us a review on the status and the situation of this topic. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay, can you hear me? It's okay. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting for the invitation. And this is my first visit to the institute, and I hope that is not the last one. And as he has said, well, the aim is just to give just a general review on inflation and the relation to the physics of the cosmic microwave background. And well, then the first thing is just to motivate inflation. Why we think that we need the inflation and the relation just to the CMB. Inflation, through inflation, we generate the primordial spectrum that is no more than the initial conditions that we need just to generate the spectrum of the cosmic microwave background radiation. And I would like to talk also just a bit about the physics of inflation. I mean, how we model this period of inflation, how we just get the prediction from these scenarios. And okay, I must confess that I am a particle physicist by training, so I started doing particle physics. And well, my interest, then I moved to cosmology and inflation because my interest was just to study just particular implementation, particular particle physics models of inflation, and just to study the prediction. So I will try also to talk very briefly just about some model building issues, the problems that you find really when you try to build a particular model of inflation. So let us start just, yeah, this is working. So what we know about our universe, well, the first thing is that we are living in an expanding universe. And we know that this since 1929, the observation by Hubble, that he plotted just the velocity-distance relation, and he observed that the galaxies, on average, were moving apart from each other. So this is the Hubble law, and how we describe the evolution of the history of our universe. Well, what we have is just general relativity. So we study our universe just by studying the Einstein equation. And this what does is just to relate the geometry of our space-time to the matter content, to the energy content. So on one side, we need to model our geometry, and the other side, we need to say what is the energy content of our universe. And okay, so apart from the Hubble law, what we do just to integrate these equations that are highly nonlinear and not that easy to solve is just to follow the cosmological principle. On very large scale, what we observe is that our universe is, well, rather homogeneous and isotropic. So this is the input that we put in our Einstein equation just to describe the evolution of the universe. And well, from that, what we will get is that this rate of expansion obviously will depend on the matter content, what we put in our box. So homogeneous and isotropic universe is described by the Friedman-Robertson-Walker metric This is just the background metric, and here we have the scale factor that tell us how the physical distance grow in time. And well, on the other side of the Einstein equation, we had to input what is the energy content, and then we model that by a perfect fluid. A perfect fluid is just saying that is characterized by the energy density and the pressure. And the energy density and the pressure are related by the equation of the state. And for matter, this is 0, is dust, non-relativistic particles, and radiation, highly relativistic particles, then the equation of the state is 1/3. It is either 0 or positive. This is what is important, because when we plug this information on our Einstein equation, what we get is what is called the Friedmann equation. The Friedmann equation gives us just the relation between the rate of expansion, the Hubble parameter, depending on the energy density, and the dynamics, how this scale factor evolves. An important thing is that as far as this we are modeling our universe just with matter or radiation or a mixture of both, the equation of the state is going to be positive, and then the universe is decelerating. And this is just the standard dynamics. And from that, well, then we get just a nice picture, more or less, of what can be the evolution of our universe. Then the first thing is that, well, from that equations, what we know is that radiation is reshifted, diluted by the expansion faster than matter. So at some point, we can think that the universe was dominated by radiation, and indeed we know that from the indirect observation of the nucleosynthesis. But at some point, then the universe will become dominated by matter. And indeed, what we know nowadays is that there is another component that is what we call dark energy, and we really don't know what it is, but is what is just driving the accelerated expansion of our universe nowadays, and it has a negative equation of the state. It's completely different from matter or radiation. So from today, we can go backwards. We know that we will reach this point where of matter radiation equality. Before that, when the universe was radiation dominated, then we formed just the light nuclei. And then, okay, here we don't have, up to here, we have observations, data, direct or indirect, but we have observation. Before that, what we had to input is just information from particle physics. We know that we have the standard model of particles, and then at some point, around 1 second, most probably there was a quark-hadron transition, and before we have the electroweak transitions, we have observed this electroweak scale in the accelerators at CERN, at LEP mainly. So we know about these scales. But before that, then this is just arena for speculation, because really we don't have data. None from cosmology, none from accelerator physics. But okay, we can build many theoretical models. And then indeed, during the 80s, when the cosmology was developing and particle physics was also developing, they have the idea that the interactions in the standard model should unify a sun scale. I mean, all the couplings should converge to one common coupling, and then this grand unification scale is of the order of 10 to the 15, 10 to the 16 GeV. So this is another scale that also we work with in this context, and then finally, at some point, we reach the highest scale, that is the Planck scale, and here, okay, our description, that indeed is a classical description, just breaks down, because we don't have a quantum theory of gravity, and really we don't know what is happening here. But so far, we have a pretty nice description of the evolution of our universe. The important thing is that after the universe became matter-dominated, then the atoms formed. So in a sense, the universe became transparent to radiation, and that's the origin of the cosmic microwave background radiation, those photons that are mainly traveling freely and that we observe nowadays. And that was a nice prediction of the Big Bang theory. So, about the data, what we know about our universe? Well, one of the main sources of data nowadays is this cosmic microwave background radiation, and well, I'm going to focus mainly on that. I'm not going to mention many other sources, very important sources of data to describe the evolution of our universe. But the better, well, the most recent data is just provided by the WMAP experiment. So this is the map of the temperature anisotropies. So we can measure just the difference of temperature in this map. What we do is just decompose in a spherical harmonics, and well, we get the angular spectrum for our temperature anisotropy power spectrum. And this is observation. This is what I don't do, but this is what the people studying this do, just directly from the data. The future is Planck. I only have, this is the picture that they have released soon after it was launched in 2009, and we are really waiting for the complete map and the cosmological analysis. Obviously, with the Planck, we will improve our knowledge of our universe. This is so, to the date, the most accurate experiment measuring the CMB. But waiting for that, what we had to do is just to check with the data, just to check the theoretical prediction. So on the theoretical side, just to generate the spectrum for the CMB, first of all, what we need is just an initial condition. This is what we call the primordial spectrum. So once we give this initial condition, that here R means the fluctuation in the curvature, so the fluctuation in the metric. Through Einstein equations, metric, the geometry, and the matter content are related. So if we perturb the geometry, immediately is transferred to the matter, and is, in this case, to the photons, and in this case, to the temperature. So what we get is just the transfer function that will depend on the cosmology. So on all the parameters that describe our universe, like, for example, the Hubble rate of expansion and the matter content nowadays. And then we convolve this primordial spectrum with the transfer function, and then we get our prediction for the power spectrum. And here I'm sure that you have seen this plot many times. And okay, this is the data, and this is one of the theoretical prediction. It fits perfectly the data. This is, I haven't written here, this is what is called the lambda CDM model. So just to fit the data, we had to assume some model. Lambda CDM means that because we know that nowadays the universe is accelerating, we need some component with a negative equation of the state, and what we take is a constant equation, negative but constant equation of the state. This is the lambda, the cosmological constant, used by Einstein in the first years. And then colder matter is that apart from that component, we have mainly universe dominated by matter. And well, this plot spans just like 3 orders of magnitude in a scale. So this is the largest observable scale that is given by the inverse of the value of the Hubble parameter nowadays. So this is the physical scale. This is the size of our universe that we can observe today. At any time in the evolution of the universe, that was, let us say, the size of the box, the physical box, just to study our universe. And then here it just expands to the more or less the galaxy scale. And this plot gives a lot of information. Well, usually this was a nice prediction that the position of the first peak is just related to the total matter content of our universe. And this indicates that we are living in a spatially flat universe. So the spatial geometry of our universe that could be open, closed, or flat, the data indicate that is just flat. This is what we expect, just to get from Planck. I just got from the Blue Book of Planck, and here is the state of the art so far, more or less. This was written some years ago. I think that this was before the latest WMAP release. But Planck will just measure the whole spectrum, and then it will just measure all these acoustic peaks. And obviously, with that, we will improve just on the precision of the cosmological parameters that we need to describe the evolution of our universe. What are there? Well, this is how we model that picture. This is for a lambda, as I say, a lambda CDM model. So we have on one side just mainly the cosmological parameters that describe the background evolution. And what we need is, okay, so homogeneous and isotropic background evolution. Here we have the Hubble rate and the matter content. As I say, is mainly at 20, well, roughly 25%, 23% of matter. The surprise was that, okay, since 98 we know that there should be something else that we call dark energy, because we don't have a better name. This component has an equation of the state that is negative. And in this lambda CDM is modeled by a constant equation of the state. And we know also that we have roughly 4% of the variance. So this is what is called the cosmic budget, and I'm not going to talk more about that. The important thing is that, and this is given in these parameters, the density parameters. That is just the energy density divided by the critical density. The density, the total energy density that we will need to get a flat universe. So if the sum of all this is 1, then this is the indication that we are in a flat universe. Obviously, the data has an error and is not, well, the difference is not exactly 0. But, okay, it's no more than 1% within the error. So we say that we live in a spatially flat universe. This is for the background, and then the important thing, as I say, are the initial conditions, just to generate the fluctuations in the temperature. We need to give an initial condition for the fluctuation in the curvature, and then we will transfer that to the temperature. And, well, that primordial spectrum, that initial condition so far are consistent with an adiabatic meaning that is mainly dominated by one component, and scale invariant, that it doesn't depend on the scale, and pretty Gaussian. Still, we haven't any indication of non-Gaussianity. But, well, even if we say that it's adiabatic, scale invariant, and Gaussian, there are, from scale invariant, we already know that it's not perfectly scale invariant, and within some assumptions, it seems that the spectrum is red tilted, the spectral index is less than 1, and apart, the primordial spectrum englobes all the fluctuations in the metric. So in the metric, we have scalar, vectors, and tensor. Vectors, usually, we don't know any mechanism just to amplify the vector. So vector during the evolution will be diluted. So mainly, we consider scalars and tensors. We have the primordial gravity waves. So we can also measure what is the primordial gravity wave content of our spectrum, and so far the only thing that we have is just an upper limit. So the question is if there are or not primordial gravity waves. Well, not so much if there are or not, if we can observe them. That's the question. I mean, there may be there, but if this R is 10 to the minus 4, then no chance that we will observe these primordial gravity waves. And okay, if it departs from the scale invariant, this is the simple parametrization, and then we can have also the scale dependence on the spectral index. And as I say, well, what we want to know if it's really the spectrum is Gaussian or non-Gaussian. Because if it is Gaussian or not Gaussian will tell us a lot about the mechanism just to originate this primordial spectrum. So all these parameters are really important for model building also. But this is the data, but even previous to the data, when studying cosmology, there was what were called just the standard Big Bang puzzle or Big Bang problems. And well, the first problem is that, okay, we know now that the data is telling us that we live in a rather flat, spatially flat universe. And this may have seen a theoretical prejudice, but even in the 80s, people thought that the universe should be flat. And this is a problem. Anyway, as I say, the spectrum that we observe is pretty homogeneous and isotropic, and this is what is called the horizon problem and need to be explained. And well, the origin of this initial condition of this initial primordial spectrum, how we generate some primordial spectrum with an amplitude, a relative amplitude that is 10 to the minus 5. Even if the number is small, it's not that easy to generate that spectrum in the standard evolution of the universe. And okay, those were the 80s, as I say. People were studying grand unified theories, any kind of phase transition in the evolution of our universe. Typically, what you produce is, when you study and you assume different phase transitions, what you produce is a lot of relics that you don't observe. So that was the monopole problem, related also directly to these grand unified models. So we don't observe these monopoles or any topological defect that you can produce during the standard evolution of the universe. So where are they? We need to dilute these unwanted relics. Nowadays, there are plenty of other theories that keep producing unwanted relics that must be diluted. The flatness problem. So the flatness problem is that, okay, our universe is flat, and what? I mean, this total density parameter is just 1 today. The problem is that following the evolution is not that easy to get to this point today, because the expansion of the universe tends to depart from 1. So whatever we do, even so we will need to start really, really close to 1 in the past, just to observe, to end with a universe that is 1 in 1 part to the 10. So this is what it was called the flatness problem. Numbers. Even we don't need to go back to the Planck time. I mean, who knows what is happening there? But just by observation, we know that we can describe the evolution of our universe to the time of nucleosynthesis. So to end with this flat universe, at the time of nucleosynthesis, this parameter needs to be fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 16. And well, in physics, we don't like this kind of fine-tuning problems. We like to explain why this parameter will be 1. The point is that we get this evolution just departing very fast from 1 when we have a matter content with an equation of the state that is positive or 0, matter or radiation or a mixture of both. So how to just revert this evolution? Just doing the opposite. At some point in the evolution of the universe, it was dominated by some component with a negative equation of the state. So the universe, instead of being decelerating, is accelerating. That will make this parameter to converge very quickly to 1. So that was the solution to the flatness problems, and this is what is going to be called inflation. For the horizon problem, the solution is just going to be the same. The horizon problem is why what we observe is so homogeneous and isotropic, why all the photons that we receive nowadays are more or less at the same temperature. They come where they come. And, well, here is just the standard evolution. So this is just the horizon problem. So here is just distance. We can plot it like distance and time. So the causal horizon given in units of time. And we are here, and then we receive photons coming from this part of the universe and this part of the universe. So far, so good. And then we just go just below, just studying what is the path of this photon, and we see just by drawing just the cone line from this point that regions of the universe were not in causal contact ever. So it is impossible. I mean, how this point here and this point here knew that they should be at the same temperature. So that was really a problem. The solution is just, again, that we get to this picture, and then when we get to 0, this is what we call Big Bang, whatever it is. The solution is the same, is that this is due to the evolution with an equation of the state that is positive. So how to solve this problem? Just doing the same. Just assuming that at some point, the evolution of the universe was dominated by something with an equation of the state that is negative. So what the 0 now in our time evolution is not the Big Bang. And then what is happening is that indeed, from here to here, the particle horizon increases, but from here to here, the particle horizon decreases. So what happened is that we can put the region that would correspond to the observable universe today inside the particle horizon. And during this period, the observable universe will grow faster than the particle horizon. So at some point, all the points corresponding to our observable universe will be in causal contact. And the solution, as I say, is just the same, just assuming that we have some accelerated expansion at some point in the evolution of our universe. So, So the solution is the same. And this is exactly what we call inflation. So inflation is no more than an early period of accelerating expansion that means that the causal horizon is decreasing. That means that we need something with a negative equation of a state. And at the same time that we solve these problems, then we have a byproduct that they realize. So the main motivation was just to solve these problems. And they realized very soon that at the same time they will give rise to a mechanism that just freeze the fluctuations during inflation, so they survive, and they just provide initial conditions for the CMB. And then the problem of the unwanted relics, because an accelerated expansion usually is translated that the scale factor, that is the one that is controlling the physical distance, the physical side of our universe, is growing exponentially, then everything is diluted by the expansion. So we only need to be sure that whatever we are producing, monopoles or whatever domain walls, they are produced before inflation, and then we have a nice solution. Then the point is how to get to this accelerated expansion. So, well, in physics we like to work with scalar fields. They are easy. So the simpler way is not the only one. So one thing is the mechanism of inflation, and then another thing is how we implement this mechanism of inflation. So this is not the only one, but is the one that survives all the tests, all the possible tests. So just if we have a scalar field just moving in a potential, the potential is the one dictating its interactions, and it's just slowly rolling down the potential. So we can imagine that we have a rather flat potential and the field is just moving slowly. Moving slowly means that the kinetic energy is subdominant. So this is the condition for inflation. When we enter in this region where the kinetic energy is subdominant and is dominated by the potential energy, then one can see that the pressure is negative. The equation of the state is practically -1. So this will give rise to an accelerated period of inflation. And the important thing is, well, this is what is say always, that we have a flat potential. Flat meaning that we need to compare the slope and the curvature of our potential with respect to the physical scale. And the physical scale is the Hubble rate of expansion. The expansion is the one that is slowing down the motion of the field. And then to quantify how flat needs to be our potential, then we define what are called the slow roll parameters, just comparing the curvature with the potential that it indeed is just the Hubble rate of expansion, and the slope with the potential that is the Hubble rate of expansion. And then we can simplify the evolution of our field, and this is just the evolution in the slow roll region. It's just overdamped oscillator, indeed. So once we can write whatever potential and just check in the prediction. The first thing is that, we need to solve the horizon problem, mainly the horizon problem. If we solve the horizon problem, it's secure that we are solving the flatness problem. So we need enough inflation. So the number of defaults of inflation, the logarithmic expansion, is just, usually it's 40 and 60. It depends. It's model dependent. It really depends on the model. And then what we want is just to generate the primordial spectrum, the initial conditions. So what we do now is that we have a field that indeed is a quantum field. So we have the fluctuation of the field. Those fluctuations are transferred to the metric, to the curvature fluctuation, and this is the one that generates the primordial spectrum. And the amplitude of the primordial spectrum is just the number that it was first measured by COBE, and it has been confirmed by WMAP later. About the number of defaults, just very briefly. As I say, we need to match the largest observable scale today that is given in comoving wave number by the Hubble parameter. This scale should just cross the horizon during inflation. So this is, so indeed what we need to consider is just evolution after inflation. Inflation needs to end. We need to stop inflation. then we need to recover just the standard evolution. Radiation dominator, nucleosynthesis, matter domination, and then nowadays dark energy dominated. This bridge between inflation and the standard evolution is what is called reheating. In a sense, is that because of the exponential expansion, everything is diluted, radiation, anything may disappear during inflation, and then we end with, as Colin Turner said, with a very cold universe, and we need to reheat the universe. That's the origin of the name. And well, because of this bridge that is really model dependent, it depends on what are the interaction of the inflaton field with other fields and so far and so on. So we end with this prediction for the number of e-folds, that because, I mean, the main thing is this is 56 roughly, and because of that everyone says that, okay, we need 60 folds of inflation. So, well, that depends on the model of inflation. I mean, if the scale of inflation, that no one says that it has to be 10 to the 15. I mean, inflation must end before nucleosynthesis. This is all that we know. It may end at 1 TeV. Why not? So if the scale of inflation is really low, then we need less number of e-folds. And if the interaction of the inflaton field are really weak, and this period of reheating is really long, we need radiation start here after the inflaton decay. So if the interaction are really weak, then we lower just also that temperature is enough before nucleosynthesis, and also we can lower the number of e-folds. So the usual range is between, well, a bit extreme, it can be even 35, between 35 and 65, roughly. But the important thing are the primordial spectrum. This is what is related to the observations, and here is more or less some cartoon with what is happening. How we generate something that survives inflation. This is just because, okay, during inflation, the Hubble rate of expansion is rather constant. It's dominated by a rather flat potential, and then this is rather constant, but we have the fluctuation of the fields. So depending on the scale, it doesn't matter if the comoving scale is large enough. What we see in our physical box is just the field oscillating. But because all the physical scales just go with the scale factor at some point, the wavelength of these fluctuations just cross the horizon, and what we see in our physical box is just a rather constant amplitude for the fluctuation. So that point when the wavelength just becomes larger than the physical Hubble horizon is what is called the horizon crossing, when the perturbation becomes super Hubble. Inside the box it was sub Hubble, and then when it becomes when it crossed the horizon, it became the super Hubble, and then it just freeze as a classical perturbation. Really, even if it was quantum in origin, then once it just crossed the horizon, we can treat the fluctuation. We see just a rather constant amplitude. We can treat the fluctuation as a classical perturbation. We can compute the spectrum, and the spectrum of the field is just controlled by the only physical scale that we have, and that scale is just the Hubble rate of expansion up the time. So this is the prediction for our field, and then we just convert it just through the Einstein, through the Friedmann-Einstein equation, just perturbing the Friedmann equation. We just convert this perturbation of the field into the perturbation for the curvature. So this is the prediction for our primordial spectrum. And even if this is constant, it depends, it just varies with time during inflation. So because the spectrum depends at which point during the evolution, the fluctuation for a given wave number just cross the horizon, then we will have some deviation from a perfectly scale invariant spectrum, just given by the fact that h is not strictly constant, and then we can compute that. This is the spectral index, and because of that I was introducing previously these slow roll parameters. This is the ones that tell us that if we can have inflation or not, but also it are the ones that are giving us all the time evolution of all the parameters during inflation. So all the predictions from inflation are parameterized in terms of these slow roll parameters. And these slow roll parameters are smaller than 1 by definition, because if not, we don't have inflation. So we have just a small deviation from a perfectly scaling invariant spectrum, and then we can also just take the derivative of the spectral index and just compute the dependence of the spectral index with the scale. That is just the running of the spectral index. And well, if we are perturbing the metric, we are perturbing both the scalar part and the tensor part. And then we can just get what would be our prediction for the primordial spectrum of the gravitational waves that are given just by the value of the Hubble parameter during inflation. But then what we really do is just to compare this spectrum to this spectrum and just to get the tensor to scalar ratio. And again, it's just in the simplest model of inflation. This is given in terms of the slow roll parameter. So we know that the prediction from inflation of this is going to be less than 1. And indeed, it is, because we haven't observed the primordial gravity waves. And well, this is not the latest data. I got this in this plot from WMAP 5. But this is just the typical way where the predictions from inflation, the predictions from inflation are related to the primordial spectrum. This is what we want to characterize the primordial spectrum. So this is the way that usually they are presented. What I have to say is that, okay, we haven't seen the gravity waves. We don't know what is really the spectrum of the gravity waves. We don't know what is the spectral index for the gravity waves. And it's very hard just to see the running of the spectral index. So the fits are done assuming different things. So the standard, this prediction here for the spectral index, assume no tensors and no running. When you do the fit, you just minimize the number of parameters that you have to fit. And then there are different combinations, assuming no running by the tensors and then running and the tensor. And I have to say that here I'm not sure if this assumes tensors of not. Because when you look at different plots and how sometimes they look inconsistent with each other. So bear in mind that the fact that the spectral index is red tilted less than 1 is just with no tensors and no running. The point is that the running, really the errors are consistent with 0. But all the data seem to indicate that if there is running, maybe it's negative. And in the moment that you consider some negative running, then you may allow more tensors in your model. Within the limits that you may allow more tensors, and even you can go to some spectral index that is blue tilted instead of red tilted. So one has to read always very carefully what are the number of parameters that are considered as input in the fitting. I'm very quickly running out of time, but I thought that this was, I have always puzzled by that. You look at different papers and then you see different values for the constraints on the tensors, on the spectral index, and things like that. So people has made themselves just different kind of fits. And as I said, one of the important things is what you assume for the tensors. We haven't seen them, we don't know what is the spectrum, and inflation predicts that the spectrum for the tensor is also red tilted. So, and you can derive some consistency relation for the spectral index of the tensor. So, in this work, they did the fitting just including the spectral index for the tensors as is predicted by simple models of inflation. And okay, they got just similar constraints for these values, and again, a running of the spectral index that is consistent with 0, but is negative. This is always quite curious. What is not so common in the literature is just to do a general analysis. You just consider the gravity waves, but you don't assume anything about the spectral index of the spectrum. I know that the data is not good enough just to say anything about that, but I also think that when trying to fit to models, one should be open-minded. So inflation said that the spectral index for the tensor is mainly red tilted, but what we are trying to check is just the model, the scenario of inflation. So these people just took no priors for the spectral index of the tensor, just allowing them also just to be blue tilted. There are other limits just coming from other observation of gravity waves. And indeed, what you have is that you may allow more tensors if you allow a blue tilted spectrum for the tensors. And well, naively, one can play with all these kind of programs just to generate your own spectrum. You just give the input for your cosmological parameters, and then you generate your own spectrum. So I did just to play. So comparing, the important thing about the tensor is that, first of all, they are only significant on very large scales, up to the first peak, and then the influence is just negligible. So this is what matters, is just what is the spectrum just here for very large scale. So if you have a blue tilted spectrum, that is just the red line, what you are doing is just suppressing the tensors at the lowest scale. And this is good, because the first point in the data is just suppressed with respect to the other. So you are not adding powers at the lowest scale with a blue tilted spectrum. So because of that, you may allow just more tensors in your fitting. But okay, this is just to play and just to be clear about the contribution of the tensors. And well, the tensors, if they are measured, if they are observed, they will be observed through the polarization. The polarization is decomposed in this E mode, the electric and the magnetic mode. And the important thing is that the B mode is not generated by the scalars. The E mode can be generated through the nonlinear evolution by the scalars, but the B mode is a prediction if there are primordial tensors. So this is what they are trying to do, just to measure this spectrum and just to measure the tensors. More about the spectrum, then the next thing that we want to know is about the non-Gaussianity. And well, to predict the non-Gaussianity, then the primordial spectrum is just given by the 2-point function, the correlation function, and then we need to compute the B spectrum, the 3-point function of the fluctuation of the curvature, just to get if the spectrum is Gaussian or not Gaussian. For a Gaussian spectrum, all these higher order correlation functions should be 0. So any indication that this is non-zero is an indication that the spectrum is not perfectly Gaussian. And well, so far is consistent also with a Gaussian spectrum. We hope that Planck will improve on that. And well, here is the prediction. We model inflation just by assuming a scalar field. So in the simplest scenario of inflation, this scalar field is just one single field with a canonical kinetic term. We write the Lagrangian with the kinetic term and the potential in the slow roll regime during the at least 60 folds of inflation, and with the initial conditions dictated by the initial vacuum state of our quantum theory. Under those conditions, then the prediction for non-Gaussianity is that is of the order of the slow roll parameters, and then compatible with a Gaussian spectrum, and it cannot be observed. Because of that is important. I mean, if there is a signal of non-Gaussianity, it will say that one of these assumptions, or several of them, are not valid. And then we have to work a bit harder. And well, people have studied that in the last years. And okay, either we have several inflaton fields or non-canonical kinetic terms. I mean, we start just playing with different possibilities, and we start just classifying the different predictions for non-Gaussianity. Still, the study is not complete. So it's something that the people are just studying nowadays. And I will have 5 minutes just to say a bit more about models of inflation, because well, I don't think that I will be able just to talk about particle physics model building. But well, the way that the first thing, there has been a study over the last 20 years, and you can find whatever model of inflation you want in the literature. There are like thousands of them. But we can do just a broad classification of the different models. And it's either what we call with single field models, only one inflaton field, large field models that are called chaotic, small field models that just we have inflation here for values of the field larger than Planck, for values of the field smaller than Planck, and then what we call hybrid models that are just small field models, but that also just include a mechanism to end inflation. Because really, this is just modeling inflation. What we see in the CMB is no more than 10 defaults of inflation. So we can always write whatever potential just to get those 10 defaults of inflation. What we would like to know is that in this broad classification, the important thing is that large field models predict just a non-negligible tensor to scalar value. So if Planck sees no tensor to scalar or Quixote sees no tensor to scalar ratio, then we know that we can exclude these large field models. If we don't see that, then, we will work with small field models, and then we know we need to know what is the spectral index and the running of the spectral index just to know what is the curvature of the potential during inflation. And the important thing is if the spectrum is Gaussian or no, because this will tell us how the inflaton may interact with other components already during inflation. Just, this is the standard example. So because I don't have much time, so this is what I say. Large field models of inflation, chaotic inflation, we can write just a monomial potential. With this potential, we can get inflation. There is nothing forbidding us getting inflation. The only thing is for which values of the fields. So just to have what we call a flat potential, the only thing is that we need to just consider values of the field that are larger than the Planck mass. And then if we consider those, then we know that our slow roll parameters are smaller than 1, and then we inflate. If we impose that we want to inflate for 40, 60 folds, this will tell us which are the range of values of the field for the potential. For these models, because these are the scale of inflation is the largest possible. I mean, the value of the field is rather large. So the value of the Hubble parameter, that is 1, giving us the amplitude of the tensor spectrum, is rather large. So these are the ones that will give a non-negligible tensor to scalar ratio. This is the WMAP plot. And then it says that, okay, we can still start just to exclude some models. So for a quartic model, our favorite is just, the prediction is roughly 0.3. That is, since in this plot, just to be excluded, these plots are just the quartic model. But for a quadratic model, that is just a mass term and nothing else. And then the prediction is just inside the observable range. Well, as I say, I mean, theoretical physicists, we really like to write models. So this is the simple model. But in the literature, you can find already many solutions to these problems. So even a quartic potential can be compatible with these values just by modifying your model a bit. So instead of this potential, then, because that comes from a quantum theory, you start including radiated correlations, and then you bring this prediction inside the range. Or you just model just to have just enough inflation, just 60 defaults of inflation. That was, it's a bit of fine-tuning, but it's true that if you just start inflation very close to the point where the largest scale crosses the horizon, then you can just bring down this prediction. Or you may have interaction, you may have dissipative effects during inflation, and then you lower the scale of inflation, and then you may bring this into the range. So this is just to say that it's very difficult to exclude. Nowadays, with the data that we have, it's going to be very difficult to exclude any model of inflation. What we want is these are other models. I don't have time, sorry. From the point of view of model building, what we really want is that to know what is the origin of our potential during inflation. So this is what we do when we do model building. We need to embed this inflaton potential in a particle physics model and just trying to explain what are the values of the masses, couplings, what is the scale of inflation, if this is a grand unified theory, an electroweak theory, and so on and so forth. And then the important thing is how the inflaton couples to other fields. Usually we don't take into account the interaction of the inflaton field during inflation, only at the end, because we need to reheat. But as I say, for non-Gaussianity, those may be quite relevant, because if not, we are not going to get any non-Gaussian signal. And we had modeled all this with scalar fields. We like scalar fields. We like to work with scalar fields. And we are assuming, it's not safe, but we are assuming that the inflaton field is a fundamental scalar field. It may not be. It may be a condensate. And the problem is that so far, we don't have any experimental evidence for the existence of any fundamental scalar field. So at LEP, they didn't see the Higgs. And now at the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, they are searching for the Higgs, for the missing link in the standard model. So if they finally see the Higgs, this is going to be our best evidence for the system of at least a proof of the system of fundamental scalar fields. If there is one, maybe there are others, because the point is that even if they see the Higgs is not a good inflaton candidate. So in the context of the standard model, just the standard model of interaction that we had observed today, and general relativity, because we know what is the coupling of the Higgs field, then for this value of the coupling, then the spectrum is going to be by far too large. So we know from many other evidence, and also in a sense from cosmology, that there should be something else beyond the standard model of particles. Even if we don't see the Higgs, there should be something else than the standard model of interactions. And, well, you are, I wanted to talk about a bit supersymmetry, but I had run out of time, so you are spared the one slide about supersymmetry. And, well, just to summarize what I have said, well, nowadays we have, just based on general relativity and the observation, we have what is called the standard model in cosmology, the same that we have the standard model in particle physics. And even before the observation, there were these problems that were a puzzle for the cosmologists, and then the solution to the flatness problem, horizon problem, and the origin of the CMB was just to assume a period of inflation. And, well, the main predictions are related to the primordial power spectrum. So we need more accurate data just to start just ruling out some model of inflations, if the spectrum is adiabatic or not, and if it is Gaussian, or if there are tensors there. We hope that we will improve on our modeling with the data released by Planck. As I say, on the other side, what we want to get is a particle physics model of inflation, and for that, it's going to be also very useful, whatever we get from the LHC. And many models of inflation are based on extension beyond of the standard model, and many models of inflation are based on supersymmetry. So one big question is not only if the Higgs is there or not, also if nature has decided to be supersymmetric or not. Because if not, it's not only in particle physics, but in inflationary cosmology, we will need to start just reviewing many of our models. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for our speaker? We'll start with Nacho, because he always has questions. So we live right now in an expanding accelerated universe with the dark energy. So the physics of this acceleration, it's have to be totally different from the acceleration of the inflation, or I mean, so in some aspect, we think that this could be that the present acceleration is it's the constant.
A consequence of it's difficult. Indeed, in this is very difficult. If it is difficult just to build a consistent, really from the particle physics point of view, it's not that easy. I mean, you can write whatever potential, but really it's not that easy just to write a consistent model of inflation. And we are working at scales that are large and things like that. So problems of fine-tuning are not that extreme when building a model of inflation. If you go, the physics is the same. You want a period of accelerated expansion. So you say, okay, nowadays we also take a scalar field. This is what is called quintessence, and we do the same. But because we are really working at lower energy scales, the problems of fine-tuning are just much more acute. And then the other thing is just to link. You say, okay, there should be something that is giving inflation, and it's something that suddenly is dominating today, just giving the accelerated period of expansion. People are working, just trying to join those two periods. It's a problem of model building. It's just a problem of model building. It's just a problem of explaining. You can write whatever potential and you can get it. But then the problem is explaining the parameters that you need to use in your potential.
But we respect the idea that the inflation is a property of the gravity, like could be the dark energy. I mean, in the sense that dark energy is a constant of it's just another parameter of the general relativity.
Well, it can be another parameter of general relativity. Why not? It's only that we like to explain the origin of those parameters. It's just a problem of, it could be like, I don't like the entropic principle. I don't like just to say that, okay, you just put a cosmological constant and that's it. There are problems just to explaining why. Then you need to explain why this constant is so small compared to whatever is known is physics. This is just what people call the problem of the cosmological constant.
Okay. I don't understand very well why the horizon problem is actually a problem. Because the fact that you have places with the same temperature, which are unconnected causally, maybe instead of meaning that there is an inflation, it means that they are the result of the same physical process. And putting it in other words is in the terms of, let's say, the body temperature. My body temperature is the same as a Chinese, which never had any contact with me. It's just the result of the same biochemical process.
But you know that your chemical processes are the same here than there. And then what you need to do is just to say that all the processes within fluctuation are the same here and there. And that's the problem. The fluctuation that we see are really small. So within just some deviation, there is no reason why this photon should be the same at the same temperature. The process may be the same, but then you start just taking into account different deviation, and then there is no really reason why we should see the 10 to the minus 5. That's the problem. And also, I mean, it's just the same. It may be there are okay. What I say is that inflation is not the only mechanism to explain this, but it's the one that passed all the tests. All of them. That's the problem. So just taking one by one, you may have different mechanisms just to explain that. But it's not but inflation is a general picture that really solves all the problems at the same time. But yes, okay, it's just the same. I mean, we may be happy thinking that, okay, it's just the same physical process and why not? It's only that sometimes we like to give some dynamical explanation to this, why not?
Another question?
So I have a question in relation of learning. So given the experimental situation in physics and cosmology, I wonder what is the best result in order to advance in our knowledge of the universe and the particle physics, etc. So, from the point of view of LHC, I was told now that it is possible to provide an answer about the Higgs boson in the sense that you can, probably in 1 year time, say if it is there or not. So this is something that I was not so clear for me, because I think there were some windows there in energy that couldn't be provided and proved. But I think now this is the situation. So this is very good. And I wonder first what is the best situation, if it is finding the Higgs boson or not finding it, in order to learn. The other, this is one on the one hand. On the other hand, it's about the B modes, right? So depending on our ability to detect them, and also on physics, of course, it may happen that in 1 year time, a few years time, we finish with the Planck and Quixote and the other experiments, that at the end we only have a upper limit on R. So maybe we can say, okay, that then the large fields are not valid, and so we have to go small ones or whatever. And also in relation to non-Gaussianity, that we may find that there is no deviations at the level of a few FNL, counting parameters. So then we can just concluding that the scalar field is not a good solution. We need other fields. So what of all these situations you think is the best one just in order to advance in our knowledge?
Well, this is a matter of taste about the particle physics and the LIC. This is a matter of taste. I think that there are two currents, two tendencies. But I think that most of the people agree that indeed the worst scenario is we see the Higgs and nothing else. For once, curiously. Because, okay, the Higgs is already, in a sense, after so many years, we consider the Higgs just part of our standard model. So, again, we are just checking how good is our standard model. So that's the worst scenario in a sense. So nice that we will have finally the value of the mass for the Higgs, and then we can just start measuring the couplings. But it's going to be a bit disappointing. So in a sense, if we don't see anything else, it's just better not to see even the Higgs, because then we really need to rethink about many of the problems. I mean, about electroweak symmetry breaking, about the hierarchy problem, about many of the current problems in particle physics. So for me, it's true that either we see the Higgs and something else that gives an indication of which is just the road to follow, or better not to see anything. But in cosmology, I think that from the CMB, it's just the opposite. It's at the end of the day, we don't see the tensor, we don't see it. We don't see. Yes, we cannot observe. I mean, the level is not enough. So with Planck and with Quixote, we are not able just to see the level of the tensor. We are not able to see deviation from non-Gaussianity, from primordial, any indication of primordial non-Gaussianity. Then we will be just in the same situation. I mean, there are thousands of models of inflation that can explain the data. So we haven't advanced anything. As I say, no. As I say, you can always just include some slight modification, because if you don't have more data, just to constrain the modification that you are including, then you can save whatever model of inflation. So it's going to be a disaster. So it will be just theoretical prejudice, preferences, whatever. So the aim is just to see some deviation from our standard model of cosmology